Hello and welcome to India's Eye. Nearly 60 Palestinians were killed by Israeli Defense Forces on 14th May when 40,000 protesters marched towards the border of the Gaza Strip with Israel. More than 2,400 people were injured. Those killed included 8 children under the age of 16. The protest coincided with the controversial ceremony in Jerusalem to mark the shifting of the US Embassy from Tel Aviv. The violence used against the protesters has been described as excessive and shocking by the international community. It has urged Israel to use restraint. Turkey has even expelled the Israeli ambassador in Ankara in protest. The US, however, stands firmly behind Israel and has blocked a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israel. To understand the nature of the recent defiance and deaths in Gaza, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Chinmay Ghare, one of our most distinguished diplomats. He has been India's ambassador to UN in Geneva, Foreign Affairs Advisor to the Prime Minister, and UN Secretary General's Special Envoy to the Middle Eastern peace process. We have Dr. Wael Awad, a political analyst who has covered most of the conflicts in West Asia and Middle East. He is the South Asia Bureau Chief of Syrian Arab News Agency SANA. And we have with us my old friend Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, another eminent diplomat. He has served in Indian missions in Cairo, Jeddah, Tel Aviv and Karachi. He was also India's ambassador to Thailand and Philippines as well as High Commissioner to Bangladesh. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Ghare, let me begin with you. Now, these Palestinian demonstrations were initially meant to commemorate the 70th anniversary of Nakba, or the expulsion of the Palestinians from their land to create Israel in 1948. But do you think that because it coincided with the shifting of the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, that made the Palestinian protesters even angrier and more upset?
The protests were non-violent. They had been prepared and advertised much in advance. The Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip had organized themselves into silent protests, non-violent protests. The US decision, and actually to implement the decision on that particular day, was actually meant to provoke the Palestinians. Mr. Trump does what he always wants to do when he is living by his campaign promises. But I think that the Palestinians for once had organized themselves to stage non-violent demonstrations and protests. They were wanting to walk across the so-called border into Israeli territory. And it seems that they had decided that only a small group will go, not all the thousands at the border, but only a small group.
Symbolically.
Symbolically, yeah. But given the nature of the state of Israel, and particularly the fondness of his current Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, not to miss any opportunity to use force against the Palestinians, the Israeli government did what it is very good at doing, namely inflict disproportionate casualties and damage to the Palestinians.
Dr. Awad, to what extent do you think that the protests were also a result of mounting desperation in Gaza? After all, they've been blockaded on one side by Israel, of course, and on the southwest frontier blockaded by Egypt. There's an economic crisis. The youngsters under the age of 25, their unemployment rate is, some people say 60%, but it's certainly more than 40%. So there is that seething anger there, isn't there?
Absolutely. Actually, this is what we call, Gaza is the largest besieged prisons in the world, where you are besieging them from the sea, from the land, from the sky. You don't allow the movement of the people inside, and they're not even, you cut short their even supplies of calories to eat their food to the daily requirement. They are unable to meet the requirement for their own people. And besides, we have to remember one thing also, which is very important here, Bharat, is that 70% of Gaza population are actually expelled from other part of Palestine, which is a very important to understand the sentiment of the people, the anger, the humiliation, the suffering, the oppression, the depression, the suppression. They have been subjected to all kinds of atrocities from all over the world. And I think the heroic act by the Israeli Defense Forces by killing an 8-month-old baby on her mother's hands, it was showing the desperate that the Israeli army is facing and does not want this to take place, and let the world understand that these people whom they have been trying to sell to the world that there is a human shield, they are using them as a human shield. The same human shield where there is no militant in front, even a handicapped man throwing a catapult or throwing a stone across the border, he was shot dead. And the type of weapons and bullets have been used, even it has been testified that this is made to destroy and create the major destruction. So the cowardice act of opening an embassy in Jerusalem, in occupied territories, and the heroic act by the IDF is a clear indication that these people have no reason to go for peace. They just wanted these Palestinians to be desperate and leave their territories.
Pinak, why do you think that only the people of Gaza Strip are paying a heavy price for this? Whenever there is violence, even this time for example, only the Palestinians have died. There is not a single case of an Israeli soldier having died or suffered an injury. Why is that?
Well, I think let me say a few words about the Israeli narrative so that we have some kind of a, sort of a broader picture. Well, the Israelis, I think, got spooked by the numbers, and Hamas, for example, which controls the territory of Gaza, is regarded as a terrorist organization supported by Iran and others. That's the view of Israel, America, and many other countries. And the Palestinians themselves are now divided politically as well as territorially between Gaza and the West Bank. And there was not much protests in the West Bank, although there have been some reports of some shootings by rubber bullets by the Israelis. But this massive damage that has been caused to lives in Gaza was quite unexpected. I think the Israelis used a lot of snipers, and I know how good their snipers are. And so they caused the maximum amount of casualties. And I think the fear in Israel was that if they, even a small group or a large, a few hundred people managed to break the fence and come into the territory, they felt threatened in the sense that there are some settlements and small villages on the Israeli side of the border which are very close to the fence. So I think disproportionate force has been used. There was no need to do it. And frankly, I think this kind of a force, even before anybody attempted to cross the fence, was quite uncalled for. And I think that's the basic charge against Israel.
Mr. Garikhan, this international criticism of Israel that has followed the Gaza killings actually comes at a time when Israel was going up and up diplomatically. After all, they didn't want the Iranian nuclear deal. Netanyahu had released these, God knows, 10 tons of documents stolen from Iran, and Trump had promptly withdrawn from the nuclear deal. Trump had announced that he would shift the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. These were diplomatic victories. You are on ascendancy. So don't you think that large-scale killing in Gaza and the opening of the embassy in East Jerusalem has actually weakened Israel's position diplomatically? Even its claim over Jerusalem has been weakened.
Well, I am not sure that Israel was gaining any diplomatic victories. It was the American action to leave the Iran deal, to walk away from the Iran deal, and to shift the embassy to Tel Aviv was entirely American action. Not Israel had nothing to do with it.
But it went in their favor.
Except to goad Mr. Trump, to provoke him into the actions that he took. So I would not give any credit to Israeli diplomacy in this game. And in fact, Israel has been increasingly isolated in the world. And this kind of disproportionate use of force, completely unjustified, is not going to make Israel popular in the Western world, let alone in the rest of the world. So I think, but Mr. Netanyahu does not care for what the world thinks of him or of his country, because he has got the support of United States, and that's all he is worried about. Many more states, even in Europe, have now recognized the state of Israel against Israel's pleading and request. So Israel is
even the state of Palestine.
The state of Palestine, to recognize the state of Palestine. So I don't think that he is scoring any diplomatic victory. In my view, Israel is getting more isolated, But as I said that they don't care. I mean, they meaning this particular Prime Minister doesn't care so long as he has Mr. Trump's support.
Dr. Awad, what are the chances of this diplomatic pressure on Israel yielding anything positive or even remotely positive? Or do you think it will just dissipate because as Ambassador Ghare Khan says, all that Israel cares about is the backing from the United States of America?
Well, they said they asked Pharaoh, why you are so arrogant and so aggressive? He said, there is nobody to beat me, nobody to fight me. So they feel that they have the support of the United States and the hegemony in the region, which makes them the supremacy of the saying whatever is the decision for the future of this region. That's why the narrative, as Ambassador was saying here, Binak, that it is because of Hamas, they wanted to tell the world that this terrorist organization is controlling, sending people to be killed and all these things. That's a narrative we all understand, the whole world understand, that Israel was buying time, and slowly they have been annihilating the whole of Palestine. And I'm sure Ambassador Ghare Khan will be following because he has been on the region. What they have been doing, actually, there is no pressure from anywhere in the world. If you look at the people who attended the inauguration of the opening of the American embassy in Jerusalem, you will notice the evangelical Christians who are supporting Netanyahu, who are supporting Trump, who are already said to the world that we do not believe even in Islam in this part of the world. We do not believe even in brown colored people. They are so racist, they are so fanatic people whom they have supported him. So I don't see the current scenario where Israel and Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf, some of the Gulf states finding home kind of setup to defend or to counter the Iranian, Syrian, Iraqi and the Palestinian and the Lebanese crescents, what we call the resistance to the hegemony in the region. And therefore I don't see anything in the future unless the world wake up, their conscience wake up in the international community.
So let me just ask you a quick follow-up question. Do you think, although the UN Security Council resolution has been blocked, do you think the International Criminal Court may still investigate the Gaza killings? Because it's already investigating some Palestinian killings.
What they are asking the international community is an independent committee to find out why this much of forces has been used. We are not going to condemn Israel, or nobody going to take Israel into the war.
Okay. Pinak, while as of now only I say 60 Gazans have died in Israeli firing, what would have happened if symbolically even 100 people had crossed? And what would have been the human and political implications of 100 people crossing the border?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, the Israelis did not want anybody to cross the border. And that is why I'm saying it was I would say a lot of preemptive force being applied.
I'm asking a hypothetical question. Suppose 100 people or 10 people had symbolically crossed, what would be the implications of it?
No, the implications on Israel was that you're crossing my border, so I have the right to sort of take you down. I mean, that would be it. The second factor was that if they had managed to go into some of the villages and all that, there could have been potential for violence. I mean, that would be the Israeli sort of justification. But let me come back to the other point about why is Israel behaving like this and why Israel feels so emboldened. I think there are two major factors. Three actually. One is of course the Trump factor, because he is getting unqualified support from Trump, that is Prime Minister Netanyahu. Number two, the Palestinians are themselves divided into Gaza, which is under Hamas, and the West Bank, which is under the Palestinian National Authority. And there have been a lot of attempts to reconcile and things like that. There are even reports that the Palestinian National Authority are generally not giving enough money even for Hamas to run Gaza, whatever little facilities that the government provides. And the third is the division in the Arab world itself.
We'll come to that. I'm going to discuss that in detail. But Ambassador Ghare Khan, do you think this crisis will weaken Mahmoud Abbas, the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, and thereby create more political space for Hamas amongst the Palestinians?
President Abbas is already a weak president. He is not the most popular leader that the Palestinians have ever had. And in fact, he has a lot of problems in his own backyard. And there is a kind of a unspoken contest going on for leadership, to his successor, who will be after Abbas, what. So, various names are being floated around already. So, Mahmoud Abbas at this stage in his life and in his career is trying to take a tough position, show that he is macho, he is this and that. So, he has declared that United States is no longer acceptable as a broker for the peace process, which he should have said long ago actually. So he has, this might have further weakened him, but he was already weak, I think, and he has they don't have a democracy even of the kind that we have. So Abbas, I think, is worried. He is trying his best. I think, as Ambassador Pinnock said, Mahmoud Abbas and perhaps the Fatah as a whole has never objected or protested against the treatment being meted out to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And it has been Abbas's hope that the regime in Gaza Strip would collapse. And he has never interfered with the imposition of sanctions and so on against Gaza Strip. Pro forma, he makes some noises, but actually he wants the Gaza Strip to fall and come back to Fatah.
But Dr. Awad, Iran wouldn't want that, would it? Because Iran backs Hamas. So tell me what Iran's attitude to this crisis is, and also what is Turkey's attitude, because President Erdogan is going into an election. He might want to play up to his Muslim constituency by saying that how committed he is to the Palestinian cause, and is that why he's expelled the Israeli ambassador?
I think the Iranian position in this issue is very clear from the day the Iranian revolution took over. 1979, when they converted the embassy of Israel in Tehran into the Palestinian embassy, they closed the Israeli embassy, and since then they have crossed the red line. They have been an anti-Iranian establishment by the American, by the Israelis. They have been already campaigning hard on this to make sure that this government of Iran collapse, or they have a regime change policy as well. But come back to Turkey, I would say that he is the de facto Khalifa of ISIS. We all know who was supporting all this extremism. He is a deep-rooted fundamentalist Muslim Brotherhood follower who does not believe in anything to do with the Arab nationalism. He believes in only Islamizations and the Ummah slogan that he's trying to sell to the world.
Would it help him in the election?
It will help him because the sympathy among his followers are the Muslim Brotherhood, where we're increasing the number of burqas among the people whom he is trying to get his support. Tomorrow he will have the secret deal with them and deal with separately with the Israeli. We all know the kind of relation they have. Even the Israeli are not counting him anymore because they know he is a person who can never be trusted by his word.
Now let me ask you about Qatar. Now, Qatar was one of the biggest donors to the Gaza Strip, but they had to cut their aid after the Saudi and the UAE blockade, and with accusations that they were backing a terrorist organization. Do you think, in the name of ameliorating a humanitarian crisis, they might make an entry into Gaza again?
I think backroom diplomacy by both Egypt and Qatar has been going on to diffuse this crisis. That is quite clear. So Qatar is trying to make a comeback in the sense that as a diplomat on the diplomatic path to reach out to Hamas and Gaza. Egypt has already done it. I think they have been speaking to the Hamas leadership to tell them to cool things down basically. So I think Qatar is also sending the same message. So I believe there is room for Qatar now to maybe make an entry, but it would be difficult for Qatar to achieve what it had started to begin with, their goals. I think Qatar is also in a bit of a corner.
Okay. Ambassador Garikhan, what about Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, some of the Gulf countries who are actually seeking better ties with Israel? And do you think they see the Palestinian issue as a millstone around their legs, and that they really, don't want to be bothered with the Palestinians because it doesn't help mold domestic opinion, and they would lose Israel as a bulwark against Iran, and they would lose on technology and trade?
You are right. I think these Gulf states, the Arabs are fed up with the Palestinian issue. If it was not for the public opinion in their respective countries, so-called the Arab street, these Gulf kingdoms and others would have established diplomatic relations with Israel long ago. If not diplomatic, formally, at least consular, some kind of relations with Israel. As you said again, they are anxious to have ties with Israel. They want to benefit from Israel's experience, technology, agriculture, so on, blah, blah. So much now, so much more oil has been found in the Mediterranean,
yep.
off the coast of Israel, Gaza, Cyprus, etc. Yep. So there are new factors at work.
Okay.
So, but the public opinion is, but it's interesting what Ambassador Chakravarti said, that Egypt and Qatar are apparently working together. On the one hand, Egypt is one of the 4 countries which has imposed sanctions against Qatar and broken off diplomatic relations with Qatar. On the other hand, as he had said, that they are working together. Yeah. So, I have a famous line that in Middle East you must always expect the unexpected, because some underground activity, diplomatic activities is always going on. We will never know about it until the result of it comes out in public domain.
Okay. But on the oil issue, let me ask you a quick question and a quick answer, please. Do you think the geographical location of the Gaza Strip makes it vulnerable, especially because it blocks Israel's access to the hydrocarbon resources of the Eastern Mediterranean? And there, Gaza's interests match with that of Turkey, because Turkey would like to stymie all such attempts.
I don't think so. It is the pipelines, the gas the formation and foundation in the Arab world, what they have found it in the Mediterranean, where 2/3 of it in the Syrian side as well. So the whole conflict in Syria is basically on the oil and gas. That we all understand. My point here is also very important to notice that even Israel will not allow the Palestinians to use this territory for their own, no matter what. They are besieged. But it is a thorn in the throat of the Israelis. What we have to understand here, very important thing, is what is the scenario. Some of the Arab leaders, in fact, are very good in sabotaging. You know, just like the camel culture. You live with the person for years and suddenly you're treating the camel, and the moment you turn your back, they bite you. The same treatment they have been giving to the Palestinian, palliative treatment, that you just give them money and corrupted leaders are enjoying their money, the people are suffering, Israel is annihilating the land, systematically taking part by part of the Palestine. And now you're talking of a Muslim Brotherhood angle, because what they want actually the Israeli is to ensure that Hamas comes out, then Mohammed Dahlan, the other leader of the Palestinians, is brought into Gaza, and some kind of an arrangement, which Ben Gurion talked about it 100 years ago, that should be Gaza Strip under the administration of Egypt. That's why Egypt has been put under tremendous pressure. So there's a kind of an arrangement to keep this. But if we call Israeli territories or Israeli border, as we've been talking about, tell me what is exactly Israeli border? Does the Israeli declare their actual border? No, because expansion, even the Transjordan, up to Jordan, they consider it as part of the Palestine, especially after the inauguration of this embassy. It's definitely going to show that Israel map from Nile to Euphrates. They are not willing to have any kind of peace within the region. Therefore, I think the Palestinians will pay the price. And let us remember, Bharat, one thing here, that Palestinian issue is not a humanitarian issue. It's a political, it's a historical, it is a religious, it's ethnic, anything you name it, it is there. So therefore, we have to see it from a package of the international community. I bank on the Arab street, not on the Arab leaders, because Arab will erupt again, because the Palestinian cause is in the heart of each Arab person, not in the heart of every leader in the Arab world.
Okay. Pinak, last question. Some analysts claim that if Hamas wants to ease the suffering of the Palestinian people living in the Gaza Strip, it needs to do what the Palestinian National Authority has done on the West Bank, that is, recognize the existence of Israel, accept Israel as a country. On the other hand, if Hamas were to do that, what would be the raison d'etre, the reason for existence of Hamas?
Well, I think that is the line that the Rubicon that Hamas is yet to cross. I mean, if they accepted Israel and became like the Palestinian National Authority, it might lose its identity and its raison d'etre for existence, that the existence to struggle to, for example, this Nakba, remembering 70 years of the catastrophe of all this, what happened, the expulsion of all the Palestinians. So I think Hamas has a survival issue, in the sense that whether it wants to survive as Hamas or it wants to merge with the PLO.
So, do you think Hamas will become moderate and recognize Israel?
I think, from time to time, Hamas has taken certain actions. which implicitly amounted to recognition of Israel. They will not say so explicitly, but they have in the past taken actions and issued statements which could be interpreted and which have been interpreted by many as recognition of the state of Israel. So I think that is not a big issue for Hamas to overcome.
I think the recognition of Israel by Hamas has already been on the table. They have already agreed in principle. The problem is Israel is not recognizing. Hamas creation in the region is because of Israel. Hezbollah creation in Lebanon was because of Israel, because Israel occupied the territory. As long as occupation, settlement is there, there is no settlement issue. But Israeli will not take the issue of countering that. They say we don't have any peace dealer to deal with us. They don't want peace with the Palestinian. They consider the Palestinian are this Palestine is land without people. So how can we go for peace and talk about peace?
Let us not forget that Netanyahu has said publicly that there will be no state of Palestine under my watch.
Correct.
This is absolutely the
All right. So we've run out of time. I would like to thank all my guests, Ambassador Chinmay Gharekhan, Dr. Wael Awad, Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week. Until then, goodbye.